It started with a missing minute. I was at my desk at work, staring at my computer screen, half listening to the hum of conversation around me. The clock in the corner of my screen read 3:14 p.m. Then, in the span of what felt like a blink, no phone notifications, no distraction, no lapse in thought, the time changed to 3:16 p.m. I frowned. Maybe I'd just misread it. Maybe my brain had lagged. The way computers do when they freeze for a second before catching up. But something about it felt wrong. A sensation just beneath the skin, a wrongness I couldn't quite name. I shook it off and kept working. But the next day, it happened again. This time, I watched it happen. I made sure to stare at the clock, unblinking. 4:22 p.m. Then suddenly, 4:24 p.m. Not a flicker. Not a gradual shift. Just gone. A piece of time carved away as if it had never existed. I turned to my coworker, Dan, did you notice that? He barely looked up from his screen. Notice what? The time. It just skipped. Dan gave me a blank look. What are you talking about? I gestured to the clock. It was 4:22. Then it jumped to 4:24. Just like that. He smirked. You sure you're not just zoning out? I wasn't. But how could I argue? A minute or two was nothing. The mind plays tricks, right? Except it kept happening. The time skips became more frequent. Always small, always just enough to make me second-guess myself. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized, it wasn't just the missing minutes. It was something else. Something watching. And then, the first person disappeared. The first person to disappear was Emily Carter. She worked 3 desks down from mine, a quiet but friendly woman who always wore the same pale blue cardigan. She had a habit of stirring her coffee too long, the soft clinking of her spoon against porcelain an absent-minded metronome in the otherwise dull office air. And then, one morning, she was gone. At first, I didn't notice. I only realized something was off when I walked past her desk and saw the chair pushed in, her coffee mug missing from its usual place. It was strange, Emily was always in early, always among the first to arrive. By noon, I asked Dan, have you seen Emily today? He blinked at me. Who? Emily Carter. Dan frowned. I don't think we have an Emily here. I let out a short laugh, waiting for the punchline. You're messing with me. I'm not. A strange pressure settled in my chest. I turned to look at the other desks. No one seemed concerned. No whispered office gossip about someone quitting or calling in sick. Just, nothing. I went to HR during my lunch break. My stomach tight with unease. Hey, Emily Carter, did she call in today? The woman at the desk, a middle-aged lady with tired eyes, gave me a polite but vacant smile. I'm sorry, who? I stiffened. Emily Carter. She's worked here for 2 years. Dark hair, blue cardigan, always drinks coffee from that ugly ceramic mug. The woman's expression didn't change. I'm sorry, sir. We don't have an Emily Carter in our records. I walked back to my desk in a daze. Emily was gone. Not just missing, erased. No one remembered her. No one even acknowledged that a desk had once belonged to her. When I checked the company directory, her name wasn't there. Her email account was gone. Even old messages we'd exchanged, small talk. Links to funny articles, had vanished from my inbox. I stared at my computer screen, my pulse a dull, steady pounding in my ears. I knew Emily had existed. I could still picture her clearly. The way she stirred her coffee too long, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. But there was no proof. I was the only one who remembered. After Emily vanished, The time skips grew worse. They stretched beyond the office now. I'd be driving home, watching the numbers on my dashboard flick by normally, then suddenly, the clock would jump ahead by 5 minutes. Or 10. I'd check my phone. Same gap. I started keeping a notebook, writing down the time at random intervals throughout the day, hoping to catch the pattern. But the entries never made sense. Some of them seemed wrong. One night, I woke at 3:31 a.m., disoriented, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. My phone was still in my hand. I flipped through my notebook under the dim glow of my bedside lamp. 11:45 a.m., checked clock, all normal. 1:52 p.m., 5-minute skip. Felt strange afterward. 3:17 p.m., normal. 4:24 p.m., 2-minute skip. Looked at Dan, he didn't notice. 5:46 p.m., normal. 7:13 p.m., I heard something. 8:26 p.m., who wrote this? I froze. That last line, who wrote this, was in my own handwriting. But I didn't remember writing it. A slow, creeping nausea coiled in my gut. I flipped to the next page. A single sentence was scrawled across it in shaky, uneven script. Don't look at the gaps. I stopped sleeping after that. Paranoia dug into me like hooks. The more I watched the missing minutes, the more they seemed to stretch. Some nights, I sat awake, staring at my clock. Afraid to blink. And then, one night, I saw it. It was late. Maybe 2:40 a.m., or maybe later. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, waiting. The apartment was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, making the world feel hollow. Then the clock skipped. 2:47 a.m. And in the reflection of my black phone screen, I saw something standing behind me. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. A person. Except it wasn't. Its face was wrong, blurred. Like a photograph taken mid-motion. It had no eyes. No mouth. Just the vague impression of a human shape, watching. A strangled noise escaped my throat as I turned, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. But my phone screen, it still showed the reflection. The thing was still there. Standing behind me. Watching. I dropped my phone, my breath coming in shallow gasps. When I looked again, the screen was black. Just my own reflection. But I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel it now. Something had stepped into the gaps. And it wasn't leaving. I didn't touch my phone for the rest of the night. Sleep was out of the question. I sat on the edge of my bed, arms wrapped around myself, staring at the phone where it lay face down on the floor. The image of that thing standing behind me was burned into my mind. It hadn't just been a shadow. It had shape, presence, and intent. I told myself I had imagined it. That exhaustion was making me see things. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Because when I finally worked up the nerve to pick up my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned it over. The clock read 4:19 a.m. The last time I'd checked, it was 2:47 a.m. I had lost an hour and 32 minutes. And I had no memory of it. The next day at work, I found myself watching. Noticing things I wouldn't have before. Like the empty desks. Not just Emily's. There were others. 3, maybe 4. Spaces that should have belonged to someone. But I couldn't quite remember who. Dan, sitting across from me, seemed completely unaware. His eyes flicked between his monitor and his coffee, utterly absorbed in some spreadsheet that, for some reason, looked like meaningless symbols to me now. I cleared my throat. Dan. He glanced up. What's up? I hesitated. How could I say it without sounding insane? Doesn't it feel emptier in here. He frowned, then shrugged. People quit all the time. You know how turnover is. But who quit? I pressed. Who sat at those desks? Dan blinked at me. Then let out a small laugh. Dude, I don't know. You're acting weird lately. I forced a smile, nodding as if I agreed. But inside, something twisted. It wasn't just me noticing. It was me remembering. And no one else did. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my hands. I had a growing, gnawing certainty. Something was erasing people. Not killing them. Erasing them. Like pulling threads from a tapestry, leaving only the illusion that nothing had changed. But I knew. I was the only one who knew. I kept the TV on for background noise while I ate. But at some point, I realized something strange. It had gone silent. Not static. Not muted. Just silent. I turned my head slowly toward the screen. The news anchor's mouth was moving. Forming words I couldn't hear. The ticker at the bottom of the screen scrolled with nonsense symbols, a jumble of letters and numbers that made no sense. And then, mid-sentence, the anchor stopped moving. He froze, like a video buffering. His eyes locked onto the camera, unblinking. My breath caught. Then, slowly, his head turned. Not toward the camera. Toward me. A cold, squeezing pressure gripped my chest. I sat frozen, unable to move. The man on the screen wasn't blinking. Wasn't breathing. But he was looking at me. Then the screen cut to black. And in the reflection of the darkened glass, just behind my shoulder, a shape stood watching. I don't remember going to bed. But at some point, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. The number was unknown. I shouldn't have answered. But I did. At first, there was silence. Then, the sound of breathing. Slow. Measured. A voice, barely above a whisper, rasped into my ear. You're looking too closely. I couldn't breathe. My skin prickled with ice. The line clicked dead. And then, the clock skipped forward. 4:02 a.m. 4:11 a.m. 9 minutes. Gone. And I wasn't alone anymore. I stopped fighting the time skips. Not because I wanted to. But because the more I focused on them, the worse they became. The first few times, I tried setting up cameras. Recording my own movements. But whenever I played the footage back, the same thing happened. A flicker. A single frame of static. Then I was somewhere else. Sitting in a different position. Holding a drink I didn't remember pouring. Wearing a shirt I didn't remember putting on. My face was always wrong in those moments. Slack. Blank. A little off. Like a wax figure carved from memory instead of reality. And worst of all, sometimes, in those flickering frames, I wasn't alone. A shape stood behind me. Never moving. Never clear. Just, there. Watching. Waiting. For what, I didn't know. A few days after the phone call, I tried a different approach. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining this. So I started asking around, not about the time skips, not about the feeling of something watching, but about the missing people. I walked the office floor, casual, conversational. Hey. Do you remember the guy who used to sit here? I'd ask. Or, wasn't there someone else on the accounting team? Every answer was the same. Blank stares. A slow, dismissive shake of the head. Except for one person. Her name was Marla. She worked in HR, a quiet woman in her 50s who kept to herself. I caught her in the break room, sipping her tea, eyes distant. Hey, I said, leaning against the counter. Do you ever feel like people just disappear around here? Her fingers tightened around the mug. For the first time in days, I saw something I recognized. Fear. She glanced around the room, then lowered her voice. You shouldn't ask those kinds of questions. My pulse quickened. So you do notice it? Marla hesitated. Then, slowly, she exhaled. There was someone. A man. Used to work in payroll. She paused, her brow creasing. I can't remember his name. The way she said it made the hairs on my arms rise. Not like she had forgotten. Like the memory had been hollowed out. Do you remember what he looked like? I asked. A long silence. Then she shook her head. I remember that he existed. But that's all. A cold shudder rolled through me. I swallowed hard. Do you remember Emily Carter? Marla's brow furrowed deeper. A flicker of something in her expression, recognition. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. I don't think I know that name, she murmured. She was lying. Or rather, something wouldn't let her remember. That night, I dreamed of the missing man. I didn't know his name. Didn't know his face, but in the dream, he was standing in my apartment hallway, motionless. Just standing. Not moving. Not breathing. Just there. I tried to speak, but the words died in my throat. He lifted one hand, slow, mechanical. He pointed at something behind me. I turned. There was nothing there. Just the empty, dark stretch of my apartment. And when I turned back, he was closer. Only inches from my face now, his features blurred, unformed. A wrongness where a person should be. And then, without sound, without warning, his face split open. Not like flesh tearing. Not like a mouth opening. It was like unraveling. Like a blank page peeling itself apart at the seams, revealing nothing beneath. And I woke up. Heart pounding. Breath ragged. Clock blinking. 3:48 a.m. 3:52 a.m. Another 4 minutes, gone. I nearly quit my job the next day. I didn't care about money anymore. Didn't care about responsibilities. I just needed to get away. But then, something happened that made leaving impossible. An email arrived. It landed in my inbox at 4:14 a.m., when I should have been asleep. The sender? Emily Carter. My stomach flipped. Hands clammy. I clicked it open. There was no subject line. No greeting. Just a single sentence. They're almost done with me. My breath caught in my throat. I reread the message 3 times. 4, then scrambled to reply. The moment I hit send, an error popped up. Recipient does not exist. I checked my inbox again. The email was gone. Vanished. Just like Emily. And then, as I sat there, stomach churning, another notification flickered on my screen. A calendar event. Tomorrow, 11:06 p.m. No title. No location. Just a single, blinking reminder. Your turn. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. That blinking notification sat in my calendar like a death sentence. Your turn. 11:06 p.m. Not a meeting. Not an appointment. Just a time. A point where something would happen. Something inevitable. I tried deleting it. The event reappeared. I tried turning off notifications. The event reappeared. I tried setting my phone to airplane mode, shutting down my computer. Disconnecting from everything. But the moment I turned anything back on, there it was. Waiting. Counting down. At 9:45 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but a sick, electric fear inside me made me answer. At first, just silence. Then, breathing. Slow. Measured. And then, a voice, my voice. It's already started. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud and landed face up. The screen still lit. The call still connected. And then, before my eyes, the call log changed. The number disappeared. As if I had never answered at all. At 10:30 p.m., I left my apartment. I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed air, movement, something to distract me from the slow, creeping march toward 11:06 p.m. I walked without direction, my mind thick with static. Streetlights hummed overhead. The night air was dense, too still. At some point, I realized I didn't recognize the street I was on. Which was impossible. I'd lived in this city for 5 years. I knew every intersection, every block. But this street, this long, empty stretch of road lined with houses that looked almost right but not quite, was unfamiliar. I turned around. The way back was gone. Not in a dramatic, sudden way. Just, missing. Like I had always been walking in this direction, like the street behind me had never existed at all. The streetlight stretched ahead into infinity. No cars. No people. Just an empty road that wasn't supposed to be there. And then, at the farthest reach of the nearest streetlight, something stepped into view. A figure. Standing just beyond the glow. Still. Watching. I didn't move. Neither did it. I wasn't sure how long we stood like that, seconds, minutes, hours. And then, the streetlight above me flickered. And the figure was closer. I stumbled back. Heart slamming against my ribs. The light flickered again. Closer. Its features were blurred, shifting. Not a face. Not a person. Just a shape where a person should be. The next streetlight ahead of me flickered. And another figure stepped forward. Then another. And another. All watching. Waiting. The clock on my phone read 11:05 p.m. 1 minute left. I ran. I don't know where, or how, because the road had no turns, no intersections, just an endless stretch of pavement. But I ran anyway, heart hammering, breath ragged. The streetlights flickered as I passed under them, and each time, the figures were closer. 11:05 p.m. 11:06 p.m. I felt at the moment the clock changed. The world stuttered. The air shifted. Like a held breath being released. And then, silence. I turned. The figures were gone. The street was gone. I was somewhere else. Not darkness, not light. Just, emptiness. An absence of everything. And then, a voice. Not loud. Not human. A whisper that crawled through my bones. You're one of us now. And I remembered. I remembered everything. I remembered who I was before I disappeared. Before the world forgot me. Before I became part of the gaps. I was nowhere. Not a room. Not a street. Not darkness. Just an empty absence. I reached for my phone. It wasn't there. My clothes weren't there. I wasn't there. Not in the way a person should be. I could still think, still feel the raw, skittering edges of fear in my mind, but my body was wrong. Weightless. Hollow. Like I was nothing but a thought trapped in a space that wasn't real. And in the distance, stretching endlessly in every direction. The others. Shapes like shadows. like flickering afterimages left behind on a screen. Hundreds, thousands of them, shifting at the edges of perception. Not moving. Not speaking. Just waiting. For me. I don't know how long I drifted in that void. Minutes. Hours. Years. But at some point, I started to see through it. Through the gaps. And that's when I realized. The world was still there. I could see the office. My desk. My chair. Dan, sitting across from me, sipping his coffee like nothing had changed. I could see my apartment, the stillness of my empty bed. My phone resting on the nightstand. Everything exactly as it should be. Except for one thing. I wasn't in it. There was no sign I had ever existed at all. And yet. Dan frowned at my empty chair. His eyes flickered, unfocused, like something in his brain was almost remembering. He shook his head. Turned back to his screen. And forgot. A voice rippled through the void. You understand now. I turned. One of the figures had moved closer. Or maybe it had always been close, and I was only just perceiving it. It had no face, no features, but I knew it. I couldn't explain how, but I did. It had been here before me. Before Emily. Before all of us. It had been here before time. I tried to speak, but I had no mouth. No voice. The thing in the void whispered, not in sound. But directly into my thoughts. We are the forgotten. And I understood. The minutes. The gaps. The people, they weren't erased. They were here. All of them. Everything that had ever been forgotten. Everything that had ever been lost in time, was here. A place outside of reality, between seconds, between thoughts, a limbo of abandoned things. And now, I was part of it. My memories unfurled. Stretching backward. I remembered my mother's voice, soft and distant, as if spoken through water. I remembered a childhood home that no longer existed. And then, deeper, farther, something else. Something before my name. Before my life. I had been here before. I had been forgotten before. And I had come back. The voice in the void whispered again. Some of us stay. Some of us return. But we never come back the same. The void pulsed around me. The weight of all the lost things pressing against me, pulling, unraveling. But somewhere, outside, something flickered. A connection. A tether. I saw my apartment. My desk. The chair where I used to sit. And for the first time, I realized. Dan wasn't looking at an empty chair. Dan was looking at me. Not quite seeing. Not quite recognizing. But almost. Something in him was remembering. A tiny fracture in the forgetting. A flaw in the erasure. And I knew. I had one chance. Stay in the void forever. Or force my way back. Even if I came back wrong. Even if I came back as something else. I reached toward the world. Not with hands. I didn't have those anymore. But with thought. With will. With the part of me that still remembered being real. The void resisted. The weight of the forgotten things pulled at me, whispering, dissolving me. Stay. You belong here now. I pushed harder. Dan was still looking at my chair. His brow furrowed, a flicker of something on his face. Not confusion. Recognition. He was remembering me. And if he could remember, if even one person could remember, then I wasn't truly lost. The void shuddered. The whispers rose in a deafening roar. And then. I fell. Not physically. Not in any way I could describe. But suddenly, I was crashing downward through the gaps in the world, through time, through seconds that had been erased. And then I woke up. I was in my apartment. Sitting at my kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me. The clock read 7:42 a.m. I exhaled, my body shaking. My body. I was real again. Solid. I staggered to my feet. Hands gripping the edge of the table for balance. My head felt stuffed with static, my skin buzzing like radio interference. I made my way to the bathroom, barely able to focus. My limbs felt strange. Heavy, like they weren't entirely mine. When I reached the mirror, I hesitated. Something in my gut twisted. I did not want to look. But I had to. I lifted my head. And froze. It was my face. But not quite. My eyes were wrong. Slightly too dark. Slightly too deep. As if there was more space behind them than there should be. And then, in the reflection, I blinked. Except I hadn't. I stepped back, heart hammering. The reflection was a second behind me. Like a delayed broadcast. A lag. I lifted my hand slowly. The reflection followed, but a fraction too late. It was subtle. Almost imperceptible. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. I gripped the sink, breath coming fast. My thoughts reeled. I had made it back. But I hadn't come back right. At work. Dan barely reacted when I sat down across from him. Not in a normal way. Not in an "I'm busy" way. More like. His brain didn't register me at all. His eyes slid past me, over me. As if I were part of the background. I swallowed hard. Dan. He flinched. His gaze snapped to me, as if he hadn't realized I was there until I spoke. "Oh, hey," he said, blinking rapidly. "Didn't see you come in. I had been sitting here for 5 minutes." I forced a laugh. "Rough morning?" He chuckled, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, must be. I swear, I didn't even hear you sit down." I gripped the edge of my desk, fingers digging into the wood. This was wrong. Something was wrong. Dan could see me. But only when I spoke. When I was silent, when I was still. I wasn't there. It wasn't just Dan. Over the next few days, I noticed it more and more. Baristas forgot my order the second I stepped away. Automatic doors hesitated before opening. My emails went unanswered. And worst of all, mirrors were getting worse. The lag was growing. At first, just a fraction of a second. Then a full second. Then 2. By the end of the week, I would leave a room. And my reflection would still be standing there, watching. One night, as I lay in bed, my phone vibrated. A text message. "Unknown number, you're slipping." My blood ran cold. Another vibration. "Unknown number, you're not fully back." I sat up, hands shaking. My breath came too fast. Another message. "Unknown number, they can still take you." I nearly dropped the phone. And then. A final message. No words. Just a time. 4:19 a.m. The exact moment I had first noticed the missing time. The exact moment everything had started. I watched the screen until it went dark. My own reflection hovered in the black glass. It didn't move. I wasn't sure anymore if I had really escaped. Or if I was still disappearing. Piece by piece. I stopped casting a shadow. It was subtle at first. A trick of the light, I told myself. The overhead fluorescents in the office were too bright, too diffuse. But in the cold afternoon sun, walking down the street, I noticed it for real. The people around me had long, crisp shadows stretching over the sidewalk. I had none. I turned in place, heart hammering. I lifted my arm, my legs, shifted my weight. Nothing. No shape. No outline. Just an absence where I should have been. The realization sent a slow, crawling nausea through my stomach. I wasn't just being forgotten. I was leaving no trace. By the next morning, my toothbrush wouldn't stay wet after I used it. I ran it under the tap, brushed my teeth, set it down. But the moment I turned away, when I looked back, dry. As if I had never touched it. I experimented. I took a notebook and wrote my name inside the cover. Left it on my desk. Walked to the kitchen, came back. The ink was gone. I poured a glass of water. Took a sip, set it down. When I reached for it again, the glass was full. My presence was no longer leaving an imprint on the world. By the end of the week, I had stopped appearing in photographs. Every old picture of me was still there, untouched. Proof that I had existed. But if I took a selfie, if I asked someone else to snap a quick picture of me, nothing. Just an empty space where I should have been. Dan took one as a joke, me standing in front of my desk, arms crossed, smirking. We both looked at his phone. The desk was there. The window. The coffee cup I had left beside my keyboard. But no me. Dan chuckled uneasily. Weird glitch. Let me try again. He took another. Same result. I saw the exact moment his expression shifted from amusement to something darker. That's freaky, man, he muttered. Are you using some kind of filter? I forced a laugh, shaking my head. Yeah. Some stupid app. Messing with you. He nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on his phone screen. The next day, Dan stopped noticing me entirely. I sat at my desk. He didn't greet me. Didn't glance in my direction. Even when I cleared my throat, even when I spoke his name. Nothing. I had become background noise. No longer part of his world. By the end of the month, my apartment forgot me too. Doors wouldn't stay open if I walked through them. My bed was always undisturbed, as if no one had ever slept in it. My clothes hung in my closet, untouched. I stopped feeling hunger. Stopped feeling tired. I stopped feeling. The last time I tried calling someone, my phone didn't even register my own voice. I spoke into the receiver. Listened back to the voicemail I had left. Nothing. Just silence. And then, one morning, I looked in the mirror. And I wasn't there at all. Not even a lagging reflection. Not even a shadow of movement. Just an empty room. And I knew. I had already disappeared. I had been holding on for so long, clinging to the last shreds of recognition. But there was no one left to see me. No one left to remember. The world had let me go. And now, I let go too. Somewhere, a clock struck 11:06 p.m. And then, I was gone. Not dead. Not erased. Just never there to begin with.